Networking is hard work. It's not just casual interactions.
Why does it suck so much?
Proper networking is like being a diplomat, or if you want, a spy.
If I had known before that it's not what I wanted, then I would have saved myself years of suffering and over $500,000 lost.
I was lost. I didn't have any mentor, any tutor, anybody that was coaching me, that was asking me the hard questions like,
how has networking changed your life?
Networking changed my life and inside out, in the sense that it's moved my perception of networking from being just a tool to really becoming an infrastructure of my way of living.
How so?
Well, because when you start to get exposed to networking events, um, at first when you're young and in school, college, MBAs, and then a first working experience, you have this idea that networking is somehow just about going in a specific event with lots of people and having some kind of pitch or some goal that you want to achieve, and then with time you get to discover that networking is something much broader, that really become an infrastructure of your way of living, in the sense that networking is one of the most important element of building our social fabric, our social interactions. And so and so networking, if done properly, is part of something much broader and much deeper than just going to a conference and delivering your mechanic uh, pitch to a bunch of participants to the conference.
Why does it suck so much then?
Oh, well, I'm not saying that sucks for everybody. For sure, it did for me, and the way that I didn't feel like a natural networker. Actually, it was kind of painful. Um, in terms of character, kind of a mix between introvert and extroverts, of elements of both sides, um, and and so when I'm exposed to these kind of public events, there's one side of me that is excited and it feels the energy and it's euphoric about that, also about public speaking and stuff like that. But then there's another part that gets drained, that gets exhausted, that feels sometimes the frustration of fake interactions, or just something that feels like boring or not authentic or not interesting. And so when you have the kind of classic approach to networking, where you have this idea, okay, there's a networking event, therefore I must go, because that's part of the goal that I want to reach, regardless what it is. It can be dating, or getting to know new people, or finding new clients, or do fundraising. But then you have this idea that you have to network because it's important for what you want to do, but you don't understand the deeper concept, the deeper implication of networking per se.
Quick break. I put together a free guide called Network Before You Need It. It's 6 lessons I learned that helped me create over $100 million in value for my network, generate over $15 million in revenue for my businesses, and fundraise over $8 million for my businesses and my clients. If you want to build relationships that work for you before you need them, go get this guide right now. The link is in the show notes. Okay, let's get back. So I went to an event yesterday, one of the ones that I actually met your partner Borja at. They did another one. And I thought I would go and join a bunch of the breakout rooms And I realized I just had so much work to do that I was just going to listen to some of the speeches. So I like passively listened to some of the panels and some of the speakers, and I just completely ignored the entire networking side of it because I'm like, I just don't have time for this. Like, what I'm building is so much more important right now. Um, where last time I did this a few months ago, I was in a bunch of break rooms talking to a bunch of people, not really paying attention to the speakers in the panel. And I don't know what happened.
So I feel like what you did and it's completely natural and it's completely legitimate because we are and we live we are dynamic beings and we live in dynamic environments. So this idea that networking is a specific uh, box in a specific format is I think is completely wrong, and so it's very important, as I said before, to understand that networking is an infrastructure of social living, and in that regard, I think it's important to be framed. And let me share, as you did with me, let me share with you what are the my vision or my understanding through at least 30 years of being exposed to different type of networking and different type of context, that networking can be expressed in different forms and shapes. The ones that I observe by myself are there's a networking that I call random networking, so that you go to an event and you don't know exactly why or what you want, but you know it's good for you, and you go there and you randomly start to talk with people. Then there's the opposite, that is the utilitarian networking, which is kind of the mainstream understanding of networking, which is I'm going to a networking event that is, for example, about deep tech or about dating or about a specific market, because my goal is to achieve a specific objective. For example, I want to raise for my company or I want to find new clients. That is a very tactical approach, and it's goal oriented, and it's probably my understanding is how most networking gets understood. But for me, and having only utilitarian networking doesn't it's not really enough. There's a there's a more strategic and higher level of networking that I call intentional networking. And intentional networking is where you have a vision, when you have a larger long-term mission that you want to achieve, and networking becomes the tool that you develop in an organic way to achieve that mission. And uh, and I think it's very important to be able to combine both utilitarian and intentional networking in order to be at your best, and to express yourself at your best. And then last form is sometimes there's what I call serendipity networking, which is um, unexpected outcomes that comes from networking experiences, and that can be very very beautiful. But for that, you need a space to have that kind of serendipity, and it happened to me in the past.
I'm glad you mentioned having a bigger vision for the networking because people often think about when you're running a company, whether you're a founder or an investing investment firm, you need to know what it is you're working towards, right? But oftentimes people don't think about this on a personal level. And so I've often had conversations with people who are running a business at the earlier stages and they don't know why they're building the company. Like they're like, oh, it's just something that I think can make money, but they're not like emotionally tied to it. They don't think about the why. They don't think about their lifestyle, like the future that they want to have. And so they oftentimes start something that may not actually align with the life they want. For example, I had this consulting business that did really well. There were no investors involved. The team was very lean and did really well. But then I started this tech company that was very heavy on team, required a tremendous amount of money from investors, and it didn't make any money. And I was stressed all the time. I was miserable. I had panic attacks and anxiety. And after a few years, I was like, screw it. This isn't worth it. This is not the lifestyle that I want. I was so much happier with a smaller team doing something that didn't need investors. And so I've gone back to that and I'm so much happier now. And I thought I wanted to take the money I had made from that other business to get myself into the next level. But what I realized by doing it was it's not actually what I wanted. And if I had known before that it's not what I wanted, then I would have saved myself years of suffering and over $500,000 dollars lost that, or that I had invested that of my own money that, I'll never recover.
Yeah, I mean, I totally hear you because I've been there too. Um, but there's I think so listening to you, it brings me to two considerations. One is um, lots of what is our pattern in life is trial and error, and lots of things, including education and making business, are what they're called um, experience-based um, goods, if you want to call it in that way. But in the sense that it's very difficult to understand if you like or if you are gifted for I don't know, studying engineering or law, if you've never been exposed to that, if you never really tried. And sometimes we have ideas, sometimes also romantic ideas about, these images that we all have about what is to be a founder of a tech company and how cool and fun and challenging can be. But then until you don't try, you don't know. And B, it can also be that the next time that you try with a different business, the different context and a different moment of your life, you would absolutely thrive into that experience, and you would enjoy. So there's this part which is we got to try by ourselves, and also that drives me to another consideration that is valid for important choices in life, like business or the kind of partner that we want to have or the kind of family that we want to build, but it's also valid for networking. And it is the importance of having proper mentoring and proper coaching about what is our the with to be aware of what we want from our life. And I've been missing this, at least in the first part of my life, when I've been studying engineering and then working in different industrial companies and manufacturing sectors, etc. And I was every 1 or 2 years I was changing company and business, just because I was getting bored and because I couldn't find anything that was really intellectually stimulating for me, and because basically I was lost. I didn't have any mentor, any tutor, anybody that was coaching me, that was asking me the hard questions like, hey dude, what do you want from your life? How do you see yourself in 5 years? What are the implications of the choices that you make? And if you are not aware of this, then you learn by doing, but sometimes is absolutely painful. And yet again, the same is valid for networking. Just being exposed to networking for the sake of networking, yes, it can bring some benefits and dividend, but perhaps it can be just that you get 10% or 20% of what you could theoretically get out of networking experience if you're really mindful about that, if you really have some coaching, if you are self-aware about what you need, and then you become aware about the people that you are start to network. But that requires a lot of work, internal work about what you want, what you're doing. In your case, start a new company, so for you and that specific event wasn't that important for you to network, but it was more important to focus on other things. But then that work and preparation that we do about ourselves, it's also work and preparation that is required by networking. So networking is hard work. It's not just casual interactions.
Yeah, I mean, I use the podcast as my networking. I just find it to be the most natural because when you're doing a networking event, you have to see after you start talking to them, as you're saying, you have to talk to someone first and go, oh, okay, yeah, I want to talk to this person, or no, I don't want to talk to this person. But when someone emails me with their bio, I know instantly if I'm going to be interested in this person. And so I get to pre-screen the people that I interact with every day. And so the podcast has been an amazing networking platform for me. And being the person who's created this gives me a lot of value that naturally attracts people to me. And I believe you've had a similar experience. We were talking about that before, where you started something and that made you desirable by people. Is that right?
Oh yeah, um, it was um, it was in 2009, 2010. When back then I moved in Barcelona for an MBA at the Southern Business School, and one of the main goals that I wanted to achieve with the MBA was the possibility to enter in the clean tech space that then became climate tech, and now it's what we call infra tech. But the point is, I totally leveraged the MBA experience in order to create my network of connection in order to enter in the clean tech space. So what I did is, as an immediate, when I was still in the interview process with different business schools around the world, including the US, I eventually decided to choose Esade because it was particularly good fit with the type of switch that I wanted to do, which was I wanted to become a founder entrepreneur in this space, in the energy space. And they were very diverse international community, and they didn't have any clean tech club. So I literally told to the director of the MBA, now that I've been admitted to this MBA, I will and I would like to choose this one over others. I would like to have the possibility to start a clean tech club. And they told me, sure, you are more than welcome. And so that's how the Clean Tech MBA Club of Zada Business School was born in 2009, and we started to organize gatherings, coffees, networking events, and pitching from startups and meetings. So um, chat, fireside chat with investors, and then by the end of the MBA, I organized with my team and the club an international conference that was on basically the convergence of clean tech um, uh, and the need for more investors, for more innovations in terms of funding. And it was quite a resounding success. And that's thanks to the network that I created for that event. I started to deal with founders and with investors, and that's how I started my first startup that was in the space. So it was a lot of work, incredible amount of work, extra work, on top of the MBA. While my friends were going partying, I was working on this conference, but it was extremely rewarding, and it was the way that I set up my network in the space, very much like you are doing with your podcast and the over 300 interviews that you've done so far. That requires a tremendous amount of work, but you are absolutely focused on what I call the intentional networking. It's not just the short-term goals. but you clearly have a broader, larger strategy of how to achieve a long-term vision that you have, and the podcast become uh, uh, your your platforms that helps you to not just have access, but to filter that access and then build a real relationship and real value, which is exactly what intentional networking has become for me. And that's what I mean when I say that networking, if it done in the right way, is an infrastructure. In your case, the infrastructure is what you're doing with the podcast. That's absolutely an infrastructure. And more generally speaking, you're building a community, your community. This is aligned around your interests, what you want to do, your vision. So that's it's for me the highest form of understanding networking.
I have for a long time struggled to figure out what to do with this network because oftentimes people will come, they'll do the interview, and then they disappear. And that's not my goal, right? I'd like to keep in touch with these people. I allowed them into my life and put them on the camera because I was interested in them. And I thought about putting them together in a group so that all of the guests would be able to communicate with each other because they're all either, investors with, 8, 9 figures AUM, or they're business owners running 7, 8, 9 figure ARR brands, right? Some are bootstrapped, some are funded. And so I think there's a lot that they could learn from each other. I've also thought about having these, asking these people to come back and do like a speech privately for a paid community, or mentoring sessions with them, things like that. And I never really pulled the trigger on any of that stuff. And that's something that I'm really working on now because I know that there's a lot of value. And so part of the first step I'm taking with my rebrand is figuring out how I can automate something so that I can more easily keep in touch with those people, or make it easier for them to keep in touch with me. Some of the people are good about keeping in touch with me. Some of the people really want to keep in touch with me. And I think some people see this as transactional, um, which is unfortunate, but I'm going to treat them the same as I treat everyone else because I find value in them, and I learned a lot from them. And so that's what I'm working on now, is how I can get these people back to the table and stay relevant, and stay, find a way to help them more so that they want to stick around and want to help and give back, so that it's more easy for me to build a community that's of value. Because as you were saying, if you don't have that larger strategy, if you don't know where you're going or why you're going there, then it's going to be hard to be intentional. And so with my rebrand, what I'm focused on is teaching people how to network. But the first step in that is understanding what your own values are and what your goals are. And once you know that, then it's about mapping your intentions so that you can understand other people by being able to relate to them. And so I'm doing exactly what you're saying, which is building the infrastructure around how to teach people how to get better at these things so that networking sucks less, people build better relationships, and more business actually gets done.
Yeah, I mean, I think you are onto something. I think you are on the right direction. And you know, about what you say, the first thing is that you mentioned that um, with some of the people that participate to the podcast, then they they don't stay in touch or they don't stay involved, and it's kind of a pity. Um, so and these um, refers to a larger consideration that I have on the impact of social media or a larger technology add on networking, right? Networking started probably hundreds of thousands of years ago, but let's say started in tribes, which was gossiping and creating alliances, trying to understand who you could trust, who you couldn't trust. So so networking back then was often a strategy to survive because we human beings don't survive. isolated entities. We are social beings, and that's our where we get our strength. And so networking started back then at the very beginning of our evolution as a human beings. And with time, it evolved. It becomes more sophisticated, more complex, but the core of it is absolutely the same. And so the impact that technology is having on networking is that now through thanks to platforms like LinkedIn, just to mention one, we have a potential the capability to create huge networks. In in my case, not it's not big, but yet even not doing much. I have over 5,000 followers in LinkedIn, and so these people are directly linked to me, and so the technology really increase the access to networking, but then that doesn't necessarily mean that then we create strong bonds and we really have a relevant relationship with thousands and thousands of people, amongst other things, because probably will be impossible to us. But for sure, technology gave us a great access. And last researchers from Meta or LinkedIn demonstrated that now what was called the 6 degrees of separation from any two human beings on planet Earth, in reality, as of today, is being reduced to 3.4, 3.5 degrees of separation. So that that is a great thing that social media gave to us. But then as the mirror of that is that it puts even more importance on real interaction, on presence interaction. And what you say that I observe, and I close here this part, but there's a pruning process when we network. We it's like the brain. When we are just born, we have 100 billions of neurons, and that converts into trillions of synapses and connections between them. But then the more we grow, and the more there's a pruning process, because some connections get reinforced, and so that the brain can be more efficient and work faster. But the connections that are not used, just with time decay. And something very similar happens with networking. It's great that we can have 5, 10, 100,000 connection on social medias, but then most of them probably over time goes in kind of an oblivion. And but that puts even more importance on then being able to select and to work intentionally, as you be mentioned, on those connections that are really meaningful, consequential, aligned with who we are, who we want to be, or the kind of projects and missions and goals that we want to achieve.
Yeah, it's it's funny you're talking about that. While you're saying that, I was thinking about how if we look at Dunbar's number of 150, through the podcast, I already know 2 times more people than the max I'm supposed to know and be able to handle. But then I also have people outside the podcast that also range in the hundreds across the world because of all the countries I've been to and the people that I've met along the way in those places. And I find it very hard to keep in touch with people in the US when I'm in Portugal. And I find it very hard to keep in touch with people in Portugal when I'm in the US. And when I'm in Asia, I find it impossible to keep in touch with the people that are in both of those. It's like when I'm in a place, it's easy for me to stay in contact with the people that are in my space. But when I'm physically removed from that space, I find it difficult to have the energy to think about their time zone and their needs. And sometimes I just let those things go for months at a time. And maybe also it's because I've known some of these people for 20, 30 years. It's like, a few months of not talking to them, like probably nothing's really changed. So like, we don't need to talk every day, do we? So yeah, I've been thinking about that more, how it'd be nice to keep in touch with people more and talk to them more, but then there's just so much stuff to do They're like, and I don't even have a kid yet.
Yeah,
Like, I imagine if you have a kid, it's like you barely have time to think about yourself, let alone other people.
I have 4 kids.
Oh, jeez.
So I can tell you that's another element. I mean, like the more you grow up and mature, the less availability you have for spontaneous gathering or for spontaneous networking or for all these elements that you have a certain degrees of freedom when you are younger. And so that on one side, of course, there's a loss of I don't have anymore that type of time or opportunity. But on the other side, that forces you to be more selective, to be clearer with yourself, with really what do I want, and and to work harder on those connections that are meaningful for you. And also because, as I said, I mean, some, just to give you an image, uh, proper networking is like being a diplomat, or if you want, a spy, but it requires planning, it requires knowledge, it requires studying what you want to pitch and what are your goals, but also who are the people that you are going to meet, and identify the people that are most consequential for you, and to study their profiles. I've been talking with a friend that works at an international agency, and she told me that when they have meetings and gatherings, they have flashcards of every single participant, and we're talking about anything between 150 and 500 participants, and they need to know everything by heart. So real networking, it is lots of planning and lots of work. So of course you cannot do it for everybody, and so it's very important that the more we grow up, the more we progress, the more we are intentional about where to put the effort, the energy, and the focus for networking. And going back to the point that you made about 3 different time zones and all the places in the world that you have been, also experience demonstrates that if you had good connections, um, uh, then those connections can stay um, valid, and you can still have a very good relationship with those people even decades after, and even if for entire years you're not in contact, but the real ones, you don't lose it. And again, tech tools like video conference like Zoom or Meet or Teams and social networks helps us to reestablish those connections at any time, or just flying and being in person. No? So so it's important to have a kind of a, I think, a balanced approach about that, and not feel overwhelmed like that we have to achieve all these goals.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this insight, I've handpicked another video for you right here on the screen. For more actionable strategies that get you real results, hit subscribe.